it's not necessarily for people who want to launch a product, I'd say. It's for people who want to launch a product and have struggled and gotten stuck in the past, right? Again, you've got the skills to create something, but when it is by your own power, you struggle. Beginners buy our stuff all the time, but the people that we focus on are the people that have tried to launch a thing on their own and have hit one of a handful of roadblocks that we've identified as common for this particular audience.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast here today with Alex Hillman from Indy, which is a online community software platform, which is amazing, which we'll get into in a second. And also Alex is a partner at Stacking the Bricks, which is a online education, online learning platform, which is growing super fast. So we're gonna have a great discussion. Keen to learn a ton from you, Alex, man. Thanks for coming on the pod.
I appreciate the invitation. Looking forward to spending some time with you and your listeners and seeing what we're able to share.
Me too, man. Me too. Well, I guess let's dive in straight to you, man. I know you have Indy Hall, which we're excited to learn about, and also Stacking the Bricks as a business. Tell us, give us the 80-20 of your story, kind of what got you into communities and courses, what business and life kind of looks like for you at the moment.
Awesome. Let's start with Indy Hall. I went out on my own as an entrepreneur back in 2006. A background in web development, software development. And I loved doing that, but I wasn't loving doing it for other people and wanted to, continue doing the same things, building websites, building web apps. But I wanted to choose who I worked with, what I worked on, when and where I worked. And I didn't know a lot of other people that were doing that. So when I went out on my own, the biggest challenge that I had was it was really isolating and lonely. And in the city where I live, Philadelphia, it was hard for me to find those like-minded people. And so, I started building more of my network in other cities, actually, San Francisco, New York, where people were thinking of as major sort of tech and creative hubs. I knew there was creative people in Philadelphia. I just didn't know where to find them. And so very, very slowly, one by one, started meeting some of these other freelancers and entrepreneurs who were mostly working from home. It's hard to meet people when they're spending most of their time at home.
Totally.
You get it? Going out and finding those folks and introducing them to each other and then starting to go to other people's events together and really starting to feel that sense of community that I had been missing. And eventually the club wanted a clubhouse, and co-working was not a thing at that point. No one knew what it was. And I had seen some of my online friends in the Bay Area in San Francisco launch what was really the first dedicated co-working space in the world, especially using the term co-working. And I was like, I think something like that is needed in Philadelphia, and sort of connect the dots between our community wanting a place to gather and this sort of cafe type activity, but not in a cafe, happening on the West Coast. And I said, I think we're going to do this. And so Indy Hall started as a community, and then eventually figured out a sustainable business model, a membership model that has allowed us to run what is one of the world's longest running co-working spaces. And, that includes through, a pandemic, a lot of the other indie spaces that started around the same time as us or even soon after got wiped out by COVID. So, Indy Hall is first and foremost a community of those freelancers, entrepreneurs, and remote workers, and whatever it is they do and however it is they do it, the thing that they have in common is that they feel like doing it by themselves is isolating and lonely. So we've got really active, vibrant online community through tools like Discord and Circle. And we have a physical space, which is, unique for, there's online communities and then there's co-working spaces. We're in a lot of ways both, and have always been both. And that's been a really amazing experience to, have those people, but also get to watch other creative people and other entrepreneurial people and other just people taking alternative paths in their career, watch them, learn from them, support each other. And 17 years later, almost 18 years later, to still be doing it is been a total trip.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds crazy, man. Revolutionary, back before co-working was, either
I was a co-working hipster.
Co-working hipster, man, exactly. And co-workers are still hipster now, so it's like the ultimate hipsters. Yeah, but that's awesome. Tell us about Stacking the Bricks and kind of where that fits into the timeline and kind of what that is.
Totally. So somewhere along the way, I I started doing less web development and more like business strategy stuff. So I was working with people that were making technology or technology teams, but working on building and launching the co-working space as its own business. It kind of put me in a different category and started opening up other opportunities. And along the way, I became really good friends with this woman named Amy Hoy, who also had a background as a software developer and designer. And her, this is probably around like 2008 or 9. Her and her husband had launched a software company, and it was a B2B SaaS called, at the time it was called Freckle. It's been rebranded to called Noco, nocotime.com. And, again, this is sort of early days for SaaS being a business. There was not a lot of people that were launching independent SaaS companies. And so people were coming to her and be like, well, how did you do it? And she and I became friends because we had started these businesses that were not unique, but a lot of folks were like, but how did you do it? And so we realized that even though our businesses were super different, a co-working community and a software company, the thing we had in common was we built an audience of people who knew us and had a reason to trust us before we offered something for sale. And that was not a thing that we did strategically. It was just kind of the instinct for us. And it was, we realized that was not an instinct for a lot of our creative friends. They're the builders, they're the makers. They'd go out and they'd build something that they thought people wanted and only learn that people didn't want it or wanted it and didn't want to pay for it after the fact. And so we said, why is this thing that seems to be, natural and obvious to us, not obvious to other people? What else could we share? And what really kicked off Stacking the Bricks before it was called Stacking the Bricks was Amy offered up a phone, like a conference call. So it was $100 to get a ticket basically to an old school like phone conference line. And she had an outline where she was going to go through the step-by-step of how she had launched this SaaS company with paying customers on day one. She was billing thousands of dollars on month one. And at the end of that call, which by the way, like 10 people signed up, maybe it was like 9 or 10. So it was like $1,000 in revenue, which is, not nothing, but also nothing groundbreaking. But those people paid to be there. They listened intently and they said, we want more. And that's when she came to me and said, I think we can do something together. And so we developed a curriculum that was really built around, if you've got the skills to make a thing, and you're making most of your money by helping other people build things, and you want to make your money by building your own things, there's some kind of counterintuitive lessons you need to learn. And our goal was to teach people a set of steps to follow so that on launch day, instead of launching the thing and then going to find customers, you'd go find customers and not just know who they were, but actually like understand them and use that to decide what you built for them, and really using customer research at the center of what we do, and observational ethnographic research, which we can get into a little bit more.
Please. Yeah, man.
At the center of Stacking the Bricks is, today, to fast forward, it's a website with articles and podcasts and videos and things like that from over the years of our publishing. Some smaller digital products. I published a book in 2020 called The Tiny MBA. Amy published a book a few years before that called Just Fucking Ship. That is sort of 21 principles, how to start the things you want to start and actually take them across the finish line. And then our flagship is the evolution of, what went from that conference call to a curriculum to we taught several different ways over the course of over a decade, and have taught thousands of people, have helped people launch everything from product businesses that make them some extra money so that they can go on another vacation, to people that are making millions of dollars. They've got whole teams and all those kinds of things. And the same fundamentals apply across all of them. It's just a matter of how big you really want to go.
Wow, that's a lot. Yeah, that's a lot to take in, man. So would you say that the main approach or strategy that you take, whether it's a software, whether it's maybe an online course or a community or anything, is focusing on the customer first, focusing on the audience first, building them up, getting stuff validated before we launch? You said like that and the avatar research is kind of the core of your approach?
I think partially, yes. I think the difference is a lot of times when folks say things like validation and customer avatar, it still starts in their head. If you think about validation, the way a lot of people approach it is they go, I have an idea and I'm going to take that idea on the world and have the world tell me yes or no. And if you think about customer avatar, it's I'm going to imagine a kind of person out there, and it's maybe based on someone that I know, and I'm going to build things for them. And we center it back in reality. Instead of coming up with an idea and then asking the world, hey, do you want this? we teach people how to go to the world, and without asking, hey, world, what do you want? We teach people how to listen to what people are saying, to watch what people are talking about online and in conversations without knowing that people are, let's back up a little bit. I think with validation, a lot of times people think about things like customer interviews, right? And customer interviews assume that you know who it is you're supposed to be talking to. And they also assume that that person is telling the truth. And that's not to say that they're intentionally lying, but often people aren't fully self-aware. And so you can ask somebody about their problems, and they may not actually be as good at articulating those problems when you ask about them. However, when those people go on the internet and they start posting on forums and discussion boards and Reddits and chats, or they even, you look at the products they buy, the books, the courses, the conferences they go to, the things they tweet, the things they post on Facebook. Look at what they're talking about when they don't feel like they're being interviewed for a customer interview. The way they talk and the things they say are such stronger clues of what they actually think and believe. I always say, people will say one thing, but you got to look at what they do. And our approach to research, rather than interviewing people, which requires, again, that you can actually find people, who you're supposed to be interviewing, that they'll actually give you the time and that they're completely honest and transparent with you. We sidestep all of that and say, figure out what kinds of people you're actually well suited to connect with, because you're one of them. You're a part of that ecosystem where you have some built-in understanding because you worked with them in the past. And go watch what they're talking about. And so this thing we teach is called Sales Safari, is a observational research method that Amy invented and we've developed and honed over the years, where it's going out and, sometimes people will say, well, just go on Reddit and see what people are talking about. We started that way too. We'd say, hey, go on Reddit, go on forums and see what people are talking about, see what people are complaining about. And our students would come back and they'd say, I didn't really see anything. And we said, well, show me what you were looking at. And they'd show me a page of conversation and they'd say, it's just these people, complaining. And I'm like, that's it. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so Sales Safari is a technique that teaches what to look for, some of the subtlety. Sometimes people don't smack you over the head and say, I want this, or I need help with this. How do you it teaches what specific things to look for, what kinds of conversations have value, both on the surface and hidden, and what kinds of notes to take. Because a lot of times people are just reading it and it's kind of going in one ear and out the other, so to speak. And so Sales Safari is just as much about how to take notes so that you can then go look at those notes and go, well, what did I see? What are the patterns? What are the things that come up over and over and over across not just one Reddit thread or one viral thing on Twitter, but across a bunch of them. And those are the clues that you can then use to figure out, well, what kind of content should I be making that's going to resonate with my audience, that they're going to love, that they're going to use, they're going to share? Because people reading your stuff or watching your stuff isn't enough. There's tons of stuff out there to read and watch. What's going to make you stand out? It's when you give the person not only new information, but a thing to do, a thing to try, that you're pretty confident that if they go do it or they try it, it'll actually work. The difference between someone who reads your stuff and likes it versus somebody who reads your stuff, tries it, and it works for them, the first one is good. The second one is a customer, right? That's someone who's like, your free stuff was good. I bet your paid stuff is even better. And so, it's figuring out what to make for your content, but it's also figuring out, well, what should I make for my product? And this is agnostic of, like you said, format. Doesn't matter if it's a SaaS or a book or a course. A lot of our students do create courses instead of SaaSes, in large part because we say, a SaaS is a big undertaking. It's a ton of work up front, and it's also a ton of work to maintain. And also, and I think you'll appreciate this, people often say, it's really hard to sell software. And I go, it is hard to sell software. But if you can't teach somebody, you also probably are going to struggle to sell to them. So why not learn how to teach them and sell to them at the same time? And I think a course and selling things like courses and books and live workshops. And again, I'm not married to any format. It's sort of, what do those people like and what suits my strengths? But I think educational stuff is super powerful because it's both the magnet to bring people in and the value that they buy.
Wow. Yeah, I want to dive into this, Safari research method a little bit more. It is really interesting, and I feel like it is super important. All these kind of research methods, finding out what people are thinking, what they want. Currently, we do some social media stuff, also like AI, a lot of kind of chat GPT just to get it started. I'm curious, maybe could you talk through a specific example of kind of like research you did for a product or a SaaS tool, some of the insights you discovered and how that determined positioning, marketing, all that stuff. Maybe talk me through kind of one or two examples of some, awesome products and how we found that avatar and the insights and kind of what we did with them.
Yeah, I can give. I mean, there's so many good examples. Let me see if I can think of one that'll really resonate. So, I mean, I can give a great example of something we recently refreshed, and actually happens to be a free course. It's called Launch for the Win, and you can go to launchftw.com and sign up for that. It's totally free. And Launch for the Win is, in some ways, a lightweight version of our flagship course, but I don't think it's really the right way to look at it. What we saw over many years of watching people launch things is that, and I guess backing up here a little bit, who is Launch for the Win for? It's not necessarily for people who want to launch a product. I'd say it's for people who want to launch a product and have struggled and gotten stuck in the past, right? Again, you've got the skills to create something, but when it is by your own power, you struggle. Well, how did we figure that out? Well, step one is Amy and I have been immersed in this ecosystem of independent creators for many years. And the things that we're looking for, the things that were built into the Sales Safari framework are as follows. The biggest one overall is pain. Right. And so pain, problems, potentially interchangeable. But when we're looking for pain, we're looking for the way people describe a wide range of, frankly, negative emotions. Right. But it's not just what they're complaining about and what's bad, but it's also asking the question, well, why are they going on the internet and asking that question in the first place? And so in the case of Launch for the Win, it's not that there's tons of stuff out there on how to launch products. We did not invent that. But what is it that's causing people to still go on the internet in spite of all the books, all the courses, everything else, and look for help? Right? So there's a couple of things in there. One is a lot of the material out there doesn't resonate with this particular category of creators. Most of our audience are designers and developers. And if I could be candid with you, designers and developers can be a little judgy, right? And designers and developers hate marketing, right? We know this because we observe this. We watch when people, the way designers and developers react to launch emails or email courses, often they categorize it in their brain as spam. Gross. If you are marketing, you must be a spammer. It's gross. You're doing something
Build it. If my product's good enough, it will sell itself. Yeah,
Exactly. That's okay. So we're going to come back to that in a second. If I build it, it'll sell itself, because that's another piece of the Sales Safari framework. But the problem with these folks the problem with their resistance to marketing is, if I just teach them things like email funnels, they associate that with marketing. That's the stuff the spammers use. They'll never do it, right? And there's a bunch of other pieces along the way that I wouldn't know. It's not that the tool doesn't work for them, it's that they immediately reject the existence of the tool in the first place. So we use what we learn on Sales Safari to go, all right, not only what do they like, but also what do they perceive as a problem, and how do we sort of design around it? Now we'll bring it back to the point you were just making about if you build it and it'll market it itself. What we call that in Sales Safari, that's worldview, right? And worldview is one of the tougher components of Sales Safari to learn, but it really comes down to deeply held beliefs that shape the entire way they view things. So, another good way to look at it is like Apple versus Android. Well, there's people who are super happy with Apple, and there are people who are super happy with Android. And what's even more interesting is when you actually observe those audiences through a Sales Safari type lens, you realize it's very common that the things people love about Android, what is it? I can customize everything.
Customizability.
I can do everything that I want.
Yep. Every app.
Right? Every app, I can do whatever I want. Whereas Apple people, they love the simplicity.
Yeah.
They love that it's consistent. And so these are divergent worldviews. Neither of them is wrong, but if you create an Android experience for an iPhone buyer, guess what's going to happen? They're not going to buy it. Right? So when we're doing Safari, one of the things you're looking for is not just what they're complaining about, but also how do they perceive the world. The other two pieces that are in Sales Safari that are critical and are everywhere is jargon, right? What are the sort of terms of art, the language that they use to describe themselves, their work, their tools, their problem? And then the last piece is recommendations. This is one of my favorites because recommendations often give you the clues, when somebody says they have a problem or is concretely asking for recommendations, what things do other people talk about? And I love analyzing recommendations because you get so many lessons from it. You get to learn what kinds of things people buy and recommend. So for a particular audience, they may prefer courses over books, right? Or they may prefer certain kinds of courses. They may like short courses or audio only courses. And that's a thing that they will never tell you explicitly. But if you look at the things that consistently get recommended, you start to notice that as a pattern. Or you can look at, are they recommending things because they're free? Or are they recommending things because they're premium, right? And again, now I've got a clue of which customers I want to be paying attention to. If my goal is to build and sell something premium, I should not be listening to the people that only recommend free things. That's not going to help me, right? And so all of these things, no one of these pieces on their own is enough to make a decision. But when you start taking notes through this lens, and you start building up, you said avatar before, I think it's actually much richer than an avatar is usually demographics, right? This is way richer and it's hypothetical. This is based on the things they do, the things they say, the decisions they make, and most importantly, when it comes to online stuff, it's how they share things with each other. Because it's one thing to be able to, you launch a course and you're throwing some amount of ad dollars at it. I'm going to tell you what, I've never spent a nickel on ads for any of our digital products. Everything we do is based on referrals because we build things that are like the kinds of things that people use and then share, right? And that's very much by design. So could we do more with ads? Quite possibly, but no amount of ads are going to fix a thing that people aren't going to share.
Yeah.
Right? And so we come at it and say, let's get the foundation right first. And once it's good, then we can throw some ads at it, right? Or then we can be really strategic about the kind of ads. So I say we haven't spent money on ads. That's not entirely true. We haven't advertised our core products, but we do things like newsletter sponsorships, right? And a newsletter sponsorship is a great example because I can go subscribe to a bunch of newsletters that I know our audience reads, right? And I can start looking at what kind of sponsors are on there and which sponsors show up multiple times and start making a decision. I think that enough of our audience reads this and think people are re-advertising on it. So it clearly is working for them. Or they're throwing money down the drain. We'll figure it out pretty quickly. And things like that, like choosing newsletters as an advertising and newsletter sponsorships effectively as an advertising channel is very much built on the worldview that we know about our audience. It would not be the same for an audience where those people are all on Facebook groups and really don't subscribe to newsletters, right? That we'd take a totally different strategy. But all of the success that we've had and that our students have had come down to, I always say, when you join the Stack in the Bricks universe and our flagship course, which is called 30 by 500, and you go through something like our free course Launch for the Win, the common thread through all of them is you have two jobs. Job number one is to find a group of people who you can help and understand them. Like your goal is to understand them deeply, and we give you the tools to start doing that and hone that understanding. And then with that understanding, your goal is to help them. And every way possible to help them in public. If you do those two things, if you find people in their native habitats and you do the work to understand them, and then you use that understanding to help them in public, you can create and sell anything to them, so long as the things that you're creating and selling are also based on that understanding.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. There's so much to cover. I want to go back into the newsletter sponsorship thing in a second. Let's dive deeper into this customer research avatar thing, because I think it's one of the most important things, and it very much is 80-20, where it's like, we talk about the offer and the approach and the avatar and what that mix looks like. Again, so we don't want to use the word avatar, but it's like that, like 80-20, where you figure out that kind of core unlock, and then whether you're doing a VSL or whether you're doing a Facebook or a high ticket call, everything can stem from there, and it almost kind of builds itself. But if you get this wrong, you can have the flashiest landing page and the sickest ads and it's not going to resonate.
Or you'll spend a ton of time and money to figure it out, which like
Having
that's
to
an option.
tweak.
If you have nothing but time and money, you can fuck around all day long. Our students don't have infinite time and money. They want to have something, out into the world in weeks, maybe even less. And if you're going to be efficient and effective with your time and your money, you got to be willing to drop stuff that doesn't work and focus on the stuff that does, and get it to the point where I know this works now. And if you decide you want to throw money at a thing that works, that is almost always a good bet. But throwing money at a thing that you're not sure is going to work yet, to me, that's you're banking on luck.
Yeah. So can we just recap in terms of the research process? You said there were kind of the three main things. Can you just like recap what they are and also?
So there's pain, jargon, worldview, and recommendations are the four main categories. And, we go into the categories don't change, but depending on the place you're doing at the kind of audience, there's some subtlety and nuance. We're actually working on some new versions, some new additions to the Safari framework. As when we started doing this, it was a lot more like, forums and subreddits, but the state of social media has gotten weird and it's more fragmented. And sometimes you have to kind of, since you can't necessarily go to, subreddits obviously still exist, but rather than going to a page where the platform has curated the list for you, sometimes you have to do the work to curate the list yourself, whether that's on Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever it is. But basically, how do you curate it so that in some cases you can actually get the algorithm to work in your favor, where it starts showing you more stuff like the thing you've already intentionally chosen to follow. But ultimately, wherever it is, the technique may shift a little bit, instead of on a subreddit where it's like there's a post title, an original poster, and then like threaded discussions underneath. That's pretty different from a LinkedIn post where there's something up at the top and then people doing stuff in the comments. It's not crazy different, but it's different enough where a lot of times folks aren't entirely sure how to adapt the framework. And so that's some of the new stuff that we're working on this year. But ultimately, the foundational pieces that you're collecting in every session is pain, jargon, worldview, recommendations. And then the other piece of it, like I said, is this is not single session or single thread. This is a thing where if you carve out 30 minutes a day to do this and you take notes, and then you do that for 7 days, 10 days, 14 days, then you go back to all the notes across all the sessions you did, and you start synthesizing it. You're looking for patterns. What are the terms of jargon that show up maybe the most, but even just often or often together, right? What are the elements of pain? Is maybe people aren't saying the exact same thing, but maybe there's sort of, I don't think about like a cluster or a universe of pain where a bunch of people are describing a collection of problems that all have the same root problem. No one is describing the root problem, and I wouldn't even notice it if I hadn't spotted all of the sort of problems around the perimeter. The synthesis part, the collecting notes and looking for patterns, this is where, like you mentioned, ChatGPT and stuff like that. I think LLMs and AI can be super powerful. One thing that people are often tempted to do is ask AI to do this kind of pattern recognition. And there are places for AI in our process. But the thing we always tell folks is you have the most powerful computer in the world in between your ears. And the difference is like, AI doesn't actually know anything. It's just doing statistical calculations of it's spicy autocorrect, if we're honest, right? You still need to know things in order to verify that what the chatbot says is correct. We know this. If you are automating the sales Safari process, you're actually throwing away your biggest advantage, which is the fact that lots of people are lazy and are going to try and automate a thing that is going to give them at best average results. And by actually sitting down to do this research and the synthesis yourself, A, you're giving yourself an edge because most people are going to be lazy and not do it. And it's like, it's work, but it's not a ton of work. And B, again, AI doesn't actually know the insider knowledge that you have about your lived experiences or the nuances of these patterns. So maybe at some point in the future, but that's so far away. Right now, the power of looking for patterns yourself in this kind of research can't be beat. It can't be matched. We've done side by sides as well to be like, what, if I give it a bunch of Safari research, what does it pull out? It pulls out the most generic average stuff because that's all it knows how to do. And if it asks you for specifics, it starts to make shit up. And maybe that stuff it makes up is good, but the best stuff, I always think AI is best as like a thinking partner. It's going to come up with something where I'm going to go, it's not that, but that helps me think of a thing that's actually really good.
Yeah, interesting.
And
Totally. Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think,
Some of this,
I
yeah,
think you got to use your brain, I guess is what I'm
yeah,
saying.
yeah. I said totally what you're talking about, where like it will give you information on, pains or problems, but it's not using the terminology. It's not specific. It's like, I'll grow, like I'm not able to grow versus our clients aren't calling me back and my calendar's full and, I'm worried about paying
Yeah.
rent next week,
It also gives the same kind of advice that's in most generic startup writing, blog posts,
Yeah,
articles,
yeah,
books,
yeah,
where like
yeah.
it sounds good. It sounds good.
It's in,
And it might even be good, but if you sit down to do the thing it says, you're like, well, wait a second, I'm missing something. I'm missing a piece of information. And honestly, a lot of the times, even if you have all the information, what you're often missing is confidence, right? And you can't get confidence any way other than by actually trying it and doing it. And so I think it's another reason why actually being embedded in these communities that you're trying to serve, doing the research yourself, synthesizing the research, use AI as an assistant, but do not expect it to do the work for you because at best it's going to give you the same thing everyone else can get. And I don't know about you, I don't like competing against anybody but myself. I want to be a category of one. And the way you become a category of one is you do a little bit more, a little bit better than the average. It doesn't even need to be a lot, but a little bit more, a little bit better than the average. And all of a sudden you stand out above everybody else.
yeah, I totally love this. I want to go into specific examples. I feel like people are listening and they're like, oh, yeah, customer research. Okay, yeah, I know to do it, but it's like I think highlighting this happens with us too. If we're speaking to someone, or we speak to a potential avatar of a product that we're launching, and some gold comes out from a call, where it's like a line that can go as a headline, or some kind of objection that we can build a solution to into the product itself. So I'm curious, some examples, man, like 2 or 3 of kind of what the product was, the kind of research you did, what like insights you found from it, and how that determined the big idea or the approach or the marketing, or the product itself. Like any kind of examples you can think of kind of.
I mean, the example you just gave of like taking a quote and turning it into a headline is perfect, and it's one of my favorites because usually like people, the first headline that comes out of their head and onto the paper, most headlines, even after a rough draft, really just describe what's coming next. They don't do anything to invoke an emotion. So literally right before this call, I mentioned we spent this afternoon with some of our alumni who have, they've launched a couple of products, but the thing we were helping them with today was their agency. And they're focusing on some copywriting around their positioning. And what we zeroed in on is they are going to start offering this process diagramming to their potential clients, right? And so what that means in this case is they have this deep understanding of a small to medium business who has built up some technology in their business, but over the years, the technology maybe hasn't been updated, or you end up with that kind of like rat's nest of pieces that are all kind of wired together, and you're busy running things and you don't go look at it unless it's broken, or you try to change it, or you're afraid to change it because or you're afraid to change anything because you don't know what else is going to break, those kinds of things. So they're trying to figure out how do we ultimately sell services that are building better integrations, whether it's off the shelf stuff with stuff like Zapier or fully bespoke technology solutions. But before they even get there, what they're offering is a productized solution, which says, hey, for a fixed amount of money, we come into your business, we talk to you, we talk to your stakeholders, and what we come away with is not just a list, but a diagram of all the processes, all the technical processes in your business. And we are going to maybe rate and rank them on which ones are running well, which ones are the most brittle. We're going to give you some concrete recommendations on which ones, if you were to take the time to upgrade, would have the biggest impact on your business. So the truth is people don't just want to change processes for the sake of it. At least smart business people don't. What they want to do is change business processes, the ones that are maybe holding their business back. They want to put in something that's going to help them move forward, to grow, to accelerate, whatever it might be. And so, there's this very specific, it's called process diagramming, I think. And, one of the partners of this business says, I don't think people are looking for process. Like they're not typing process diagram into Google. They're not asking for that. Ultimately, that's what they need. And I said, but you already kind of do this in your services, right? Well, how do you sell that to them? And then he started describing a conversation with a client just that day. And as he's saying it, he's like, I think I just wrote my own headline, and immediately spun out like 10 headlines that were directly based on the language that was coming directly from the clients and customers and things like that. So that one happens to be a more conversational situation, but you can apply the exact same thing to those lines coming not from a conversation, but from, again, articles, subreddits, wherever it doesn't matter where it's coming from. But that language, when people see their own terminology, when they see you describe things better than they could describe it themselves, that's coming from somewhere. And I think a lot of times people will take, a single quote, and that's better than, a more generic headline. But I think a lot of times the best headlines are actually sort of smushing together a few different really strong quotes into one cohesive idea that makes somebody go, wow, you just described an experience that I've been struggling with, and it's not that I'm ready to buy, it's that I feel heard and listened to and understood. And I think in all of these scenarios, what do we want more as human beings than to feel understood, right? And so ultimately, again, the connection from doing the research to writing your primary headline, or writing a call to action, or writing even microcopy that makes somebody go, oh, that feels like that person's actually talking to me. The truth is that a person gets me. The truth is, it's not just that the person's talking to me. It sounds like me talking to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that garners so much trust. So
totally.
Like I said, across, we're doing all these with this group we were working with today and a bunch of others. We're doing landing page teardowns where people have a sales page that is trying to do its job, their conversions, they want to increase it. And the first step is go out, do a bunch of Safari sessions, bring them back, and we'll help you synthesize it together. And what we're helping people pick out is, rather than trying to figure out the next creative or clever way to describe their product or their service, it's what's the thing that they're saying that best describes the problem that your product the problem that your product resolves, or the problem that your product makes go away, right? You don't have to make up the language. They're telling it to you all day long. You just got to listen, write it down, and pull it out in that sense of patterns.
Yeah. Okay, man, this is awesome. This stuff is super deep. And when all this stuff comes out, it's like, like you said, the copy kind of writes itself, or at least it's all there for you to kind of choose which to lead with and kind of rearrange, how to structure things. But it is, even in the past, for the longest time, I kind of, neglected it. It's like, oh yeah, I know this avatar, but it makes everything so much more easier and, a lot more kind of higher success rate.
I'll give you two more examples from one landing page. And so I mentioned my partner, Amy, and she has her software. It's this time tracking software called Noco. If you go to nocotime.com, I can't imagine this changing in the future, because she's hired some of the best, most expensive conversion copywriters that are on the internet, and no one has been able to beat the headline at the top of noco.com, which says, my team has gone through 4 time tracking apps in the last 2.5 years. That doesn't describe her app. That describes a pain that everyone who runs an agency understands.
Yeah. Damn.
Right? It doesn't even say,
yeah.
And it doesn't say how her product is going to solve the problem. It just hits real deep on a problem that is going to be universal with the ideal customer that she has. And if you scroll down just a little bit more, there's another really awesome quote from an actual customer that says, Noco is by far the most flexible and easy to use solution we've encountered. That one's a little more generic, but if you put it in tandem with that opening quote, you have a deep visceral pain and a complementary dream. It's possible that I could finally find a tool that I won't have to switch away from in a couple of years. What a dream that would be, right? This page converted more than 2.5 times better than any other landing page that Amy's had on the software. Wow. The best performing one under this performed 2.5 times worse. 250% more conversions.
2.5x
from a pain.
From a headline.
Seriously, it's enormous. So this stuff really, really, it really works.
Yeah. One thing I want to figure out, and we might be going, a little bit nerdy and deep into kind of like avatar selection, right? So in any market, when we look at it, as you know, there's kind of levels of sophistication, right? There's, in this example with No-Go, right, which is the time tracking software that you spoke about, it's like very, very beginner, low sophistication is, you know, maybe I'm running a business and, core problem is, man, my employees aren't even working. What's happening? My business is about to fail. Versus here, where surface level problems are more so, man, all this fucking like time tracking software sucks, right? So it's like there the pain is on other options, obviously because they've tried the options, but there is also an aspect of selecting where in that spectrum or kind of what chunk of the spectrum you want to market to. So I'm curious kind of how a perfect example, right? We're launching a funnel right now for real estate investing, right? This person has a new mechanism where he goes after very, very specific properties and the government helps, and there's some really, really cool new niche that he's got. And like me and him were through research of the copywriters, we're going back and forth. Like, is it, hey, here's how I'm making 5K in passive income from real estate. Oh my God. Or is it, have you tried real estate and all these other old models and they're really confusing? Well, mine's different. So you kind of know what I'm talking about, but I guess how do you think about, if you do select or do you test? Because they're all markets, right? It's one big market.
They're all markets,
with little different segments. So how do you think about choosing it, which one to go after, going after multiple?
So that example you gave is a really great one. And here's why. I think you use the term sophistication maybe to describe those two audiences. I think that's a really smart way to describe it. I think if you were to take the angle of here's an extra 5K a month in passive income, you may make more sales, but the odds of that working long term, I think, are low because the vast majority of those people are only in it for a quick win. The large percentage of those people will buy the thing, not actually do the thing. And even if they never complain about it, they're not getting results. And it's hard for you to keep selling a thing that doesn't generate results.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And they're not sharing either,
Correct. So if I'm looking at these options, I think the other one, again, the stuff that we create, beginners buy our stuff all the time, but the people that we focus on are the people that have tried to launch a thing on their own and have hit one of a handful of roadblocks that we've identified as common for this particular audience. I think the people who have tried before and struggled are the best customers in a lot of cases because they've proven that they have the skills and motivation to actually do the thing. And they felt the pain enough to be like, all right, that hurt. I want the result, but I don't want to hurt. And if you can promise and deliver on the result with even less hurt, I'm willing to pay a premium. And as a seller, I have the confidence that they're actually a higher percentage are actually going to do the work. So I play a long game with almost everything that I do. You see, I've been in business for almost 20 years across multiple businesses. I'm often doing things that might make a little less short term, but pay off long term, right? The things that are going to be slow and steady, but they compound and they grow. And so if I'm between those two, I want to do the marketing and the funnel that's going to attract the better customer that I might sell to fewer customers, but they're willing to pay. Here's another thing. All products require some level of customer support, right? You know the difference between supporting 1,000 people buying a $10 product versus the other way around. 10 people buying $1,000 product. The people who buy
one person buying one 10,000 product,
Totally.
Yeah.
So the people who pay the least often complain the most. They're going to leave negative reviews. They're going to be a pain in the butt versus the people that look at the high ticket thing and go, yeah, this looks like it's going to solve my problem. They'll buy the thing. They'll do the thing. You'll never hear from them. The one little tweak inside of there is sometimes if you get too good at it, you don't hear from them even when it works. We have to work really, our students love our stuff often to the point where they forget to tell us that it worked. Right. And so we hear later that people have been just quietly killing it. And we're like, why didn't you tell us? And they're like, we didn't think you'd care. And I'm like, I care so much that you're succeeding. That's why we do what we do. I think there's options in both. But if you're in it for the long term, I'm optimizing for the person who is going to buy the thing and use the thing rather than buy the thing and have it sit on the shelf, feel shitty about it, maybe complain along the way, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I'm keen to learn more. I know obviously we've been speaking about research for ages, but it's been amazing. But maybe as we move towards wrapping up, like tell me a little bit about the business models around kind of, particularly I'm curious around kind of stacking the bricks. So it's like, in terms of price points, offer stack, low ticket, front end. What is the back end? What does that kind of product suite look like? Kind of I'm not sure how long you've been running it, but yeah, kind of what how each of these different offers are going in, kind of how the business is
Totally.
running in
Yeah.
terms of
Well,
customers and
like I
users, and
said, we've been doing this since 2009 or so. So
yeah.
15 years. And I'll be honest, this is a situation where I always tell people, like, learn from our mistakes. We built this Stacking the Bricks universe around a $2,000 flagship course, right? We were successful early on. I'm really proud of what we've done, and we've been doing it for a long time and able to do it a long time. But we've kind of slowly had to backfill in the product ladder and introduce smaller products and things that maybe people don't need the flagship course. And actually, one of the things that we're working on right now is plans for over the next few years. I mentioned some of the updates to the Sales Safari and things like that. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but again, watching our students work, watching how the course landscape has changed, one giant course that does everything, even if we are able to sell it, I think we could help more people if we were strategic into breaking it into smaller pieces. And maybe there's a version where you can buy all the pieces at once and save some money, but ultimately making it so that people can come in and learn that foundational technique of Sales Safari and then point it at the thing that they need the most. Maybe people already have a product, but they really need is help doing Sales Safari to figure out what articles to write or what videos to create. That should be its own lane, things like that. So currently the business model, like I said, is the flagship, a handful of smaller workshops, ebooks, and things like that. For the last few years, my business partner has been really sick, like to the point where she couldn't work. And so for the last few years, we haven't actually put together a lot of new material, which maybe for another day, another conversation, we can talk about how I took a business where it gets interesting is Amy couldn't work and she's very much the face of the business in a lot of cases. So how do you take an archive of content and material that people love and design and automate a business that for new people discovering us, they had no idea that Amy's been offline for the better part of 4 years, right? It's great that now she's well enough to start working on creating new things again. But a lot of what we've done is, I mean, it's your business, right? It's bringing people in through awesome educational stuff that actually helps them, stuff that gets shared, stuff that becomes foundational knowledge within communities. They start using our terminology to describe, they start using Safari to describe customer research and things like that, and share that with other people. And as they come in, they decide, you know what? I've read Amy and Alex's books. I've attended some of their workshops. I've tried some stuff. Some of it's worked, some of it's not. I need some help filling in the gaps. It's time to sign up for 30 by 500, which is the main class. So the bulk of our revenue is coming from that flagship. This year, I see some of that shifting because we're going to, again, hopefully kind of break up the big class into some smaller ones. We're also doing some one-on-one stuff with people that are a little further along for the first time in a very long time. So I see some new things coming out of that as well. Ultimately, what we don't have right now is really a strong middle of our product ladder. And that's where I think we're going to be putting the majority of our focus to fill things out over the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, awesome. And final question from me. I know maybe we've gone a little bit over, but at that 2K price point, how are you selling? Well, first, I guess, obviously, whatever numbers you're allowed to share, but over the last 15 years, that course has been, there for a while at that company. Roughly, do you know kind of like how many students or kind of how much revenue it's done over the 15 years? And also, what are the different like either channels or kind of funnel structures that you've used to actually sell at that 2K price point over the years, and kind of what's working?
We've sold at a handful of different price points across our different formats because the current version is a do it your own pace course that is built on what used to be a live 2-day boot camp. And again, we don't really have the time today to go into all the evolution of how we've approached learning design. That's another thing that'll be very fun to talk about in the future. So our launch strategy has been using timed open launches. So These days, we open enrollment about 4 times a year. When we were doing the boot camps, it was about 5 times a year. Then it was 5 times a year times 30 students was our max, because it was actually live attendance, live instruction. And I don't think you can really effectively teach more than 30 people at a time, even in a good online setting where it's very interactive. So, we were doing 150 students a year for a good long while and selling out every time, but we were limited by, we were either running the course or selling the course. People had to attend in our time zone, which did not work for people around the world. We shifted into this new model where it is self-guided with an online community. We have had several thousand people enroll in that course since we launched it in 2017, and continue to open enrollment, like I said, about once a quarter. And it continues to, basically everything through an email list. Our launches are back to how launches tie into Sales Safari. We have a set of launches that usually run between 7 and 10 days worth of emails. And the launch content is architected around a central pain point that we've pulled out of our own Sales Safari research. So we will cycle through this library of launches, and I'll often, every time we do it, I'll run through it and make some updates, not just to numbers, but do we have new case studies and things like that. But the vast majority of a launch content is based on stuff that we've written in the past. We update it, we improve it, we add some new things. And because we're cycling through these different pain points, I'll give you some concrete examples. So like for us in our audience, there's the people who, as I've mentioned before, I've built things and I know how to ship things, but every time I ship it, nobody wants to buy it. I'm tired of that cycle. I want to ship a thing.
Yep.
I don't even care how much money I make. I just want to know that people will buy a thing I made.
So
we have an entire launch built around that. We have a launch built around, I work in a job where we build things, and I'm tired of having my boss or an employer or the company not just be reaping the financial benefits, but be in control of my creative output. We have an entire launch built around what it's like to be a creator when somebody else decides what you create. And you think about those two people have really different, deep emotional charges to their motivation, but ultimately they're going to come in with that motivation, and the material we teach doesn't need to change in order for them to get what they want.
Totally.
Right?
Wow.
And a handful of others that follow that same path.
And those examples are so beautiful. Like they're just so specific. If you said it to the avatar, they're like, holy, this person knows me. This is not just, do you not like your boss? It's like that is very generic, but it's like, is your employer, controlling your creative expression? That's like, straight into a
super specific
avatar. Yeah, man. I've learned so much. I need to watch this back, because sometimes I'm so in the flow of the moment trying to ask good questions where it's like, I know you just spat gold for an hour. I need to study it, because the whole market selection thing is really interesting, and it's something that we think about as a lot, where there's a huge mass market. We're speaking to millions of people saying everything, which obviously more money, more people, more opportunity. But then there's like this tinier niche, which is like a specific pain point, specific person that's smaller, but like if you chase that one rabbit, you're going to get a higher percentage of the rabbit, as opposed to 1%, 0.1% of the mass market.
I always say our technique, our approach is not the only one that works. However, I think our approach is one of the most reliable, right? It is not a gamble. It is not a rocket ship. It is a slow and steady approach. It takes time, but a thing I'm super proud of, every single student who has actually applied the techniques, even imperfectly. I always say you can do these things 90% wrong, and that 10% is still better than zero. Everyone who has actually launched a thing using our approach has made back at least what they paid for the course. The people who do more than, and some people make multiples of that on their first launch, the people who take that as a lesson in, not only did I do it once, but I now understand how I did it and I can do it again. Those are the ones that go on to build businesses, because they're not chasing what's exciting to build now. It's how do I build a thing that works and I can do it consistently and sustainably. That's where growth comes from.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, man. Well, we've got to move towards wrapping up. And yeah, like I said, it's been amazing. So many nuggets. I want to have you again on ASAP if possible. We could tee it up potentially in a few months down the line, because I feel like we have about 3 or 4, probably hundreds of podcasts in us, man. You have a ton of experience. But I guess in terms of any final words of wisdom or advice for people wanting to launch a digital product, people wanting to launch community, any kind of
Yep.
final suggestions or advice you'd want to give
I
them?
mean, the key piece of advice, and this is, I feel like a bit of a broken record, is if you stay focused on the people you serve, you can win. Like, there's everything else is a distraction. The techniques, the software, the tools, the like whatever's trendy, the new hotness in automation, whatever it is, use those tools. They're great, but you got to get your fundamentals straight. And the fundamental that matters the most, number one, is listening and understanding what the people, who the people are that you serve, and actually taking the time to understand them. If you do that, you can screw up so much stuff. And I say that from experience. There's so many things that we do very poorly. We've been successful because we do one thing right, is that we understand the people that we serve better than anybody else. And if you set that as your North Star, you've got so much room to do anything you want.
Yeah, awesome. Well, man, if people want to learn more and they want some more wisdom, they want you have a lot of products, obviously. The community side, Stacking the Bricks. Where can people find out about you? Where should people go if they want to,
Yeah, I send you to stackingthebricks.com. And again, I recommend launchforthewin.com. It's launch FTW. It's totally free. It's, the page itself breaks down a lot of this approach that we talked about. And the course itself is, I think it's over the course of, well, the course is designed for 12 weeks of implementation, but the course itself is only a couple of weeks. It gives you this incredible PDF roadmap that helps you think through every step and kind of gives you the clues of, what do you need to get, so you can kind of take inventory of, oh, I already know how to answer this question. I can just move on to the next one, and helps you kind of stack the bricks towards the end goal destination. There's also a bunch of interactive workbooks in there that kind of help you think through the exercises that we provide, so you're not left to your own devices. And the thing that I'll say is, your workbook submissions in Launch for the Win, we read every single one. And that's a way for us to do Sales Safari as well, right? We're seeing what people are doing and not doing. Yeah. That's just as much research. And so you start filling out those workbooks, know that myself and Amy are reading them. If we see something interesting, you might get a reply from us. We reply to a whole lot of them, not every single one. That's not possible, but you might get a reply directly from us, and would love to see more folks going through that and hear what you think.
Awesome. Yeah. So that's stackingthebricks.com/launch FTW. Is that correct?
That's right. Or you can go to launchftw.com and it redirects to the same place.
Easy. All right, perfect. Awesome. Well, guys, go check out Alex's stuff. I know it's amazing. So yeah, sign up for the program, do his program, reach out to him, do the work, man. Alex, it was a pleasure having you on, man. Just did an hour, and yeah, I learned a ton, man. I really, really appreciate you coming on and sharing all the wisdom from years of trial and error, man. You're saving us a lot of time, so I appreciate it.
Glad to help, and excited to hear from folks who are able to learn something from it as well.
Cool, man. All right, thanks for listening, guys.